Folks, I think we have a quorum, so we can go ahead and start the meeting. If everyone could have a seat. Who is that? Jimmy, we're ready to start.
You don't have that authority.
Why, Jack, we're ready to start the meeting. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Bosley.
Present.
Alderman Kennedy. Here. Alderman Conway. Alderwoman Cruzen. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Davis.
Present.
Alderman French. Present. Alderman Carter. Alderman Kotar. Here. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Green. Present. Chairman Rhodey.
Present.
We have 8 present and we have a quorum.
Okay, we, at our last meeting, we lost our quorum near the end of the meeting, and additionally, we did not have the consent of both the Budget Division and the Comptroller's Office on this particular proposal for a TIF. And so we have delayed it until today with the hope that the Comptroller could get comfortable with the with it as well. And I presume at this point we have the
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tom Ray with Armstrong Teasdale, and yes, I did speak with the Comptroller, the Deputy Comptroller of Finance, and the Budget Director yesterday, and they find that the both board bills acceptable. They did ask me to take just a second to say we appreciate giving us an extra week to talk about this stuff and reach this conclusion, but in the future, we're going to try to develop some kind of protocol ourselves. Putting these things through with this time frame is just unacceptable.
We certainly, I think many members of the board would feel the same way. This has been an incredibly busy time down here, and we're dealing with some very substantial amount of legislation, and that's very complex and involves a great deal of money. So I think you'd have complete agreement with our, you know, with all the members on the board. So we thank you, and
All right, thank you.
And we are hopefully standing, you know, shoulder to shoulder with you. I mean, not that it's against SLDC. It sounds like it's just that we really like to see some good procedures put into place, and I think we're getting there. But if you have any recommendations going forward, we would certainly be willing to listen to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was talking briefly to our director before the meeting. Much of this, I think, is driven by deadlines. Every negotiation that I've ever been involved in is everybody kind of takes their time until they have to get it done. And of course, you know, the end of session is a hard deadline, so that I'm sure is driving some of the flurry of activity down here. With that said, this is a fairly complex piece of legislation. We heard it the other day. I think we have about a half an hour before the board meeting, so we'll try to go through some of it. For those of you who don't completely understand it, by that time I'm going to kind of nudge you that we go ahead and take a vote anyway, because there are several deadlines looming at the state that need to occur in order for this to, you know, this really exciting project to happen. So this is something I think many people have been waiting for. So I'm not sure if the Alderwoman from the 5th wants to kind of give a brief overview of everybody. We can kind of provide an opportunity for a few questions, I guess, for those who missed this the other day. But our goal is to be out of here and have a vote by, say, 5 till if we could. So that'll give us about 20 minutes or so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I believe we have some committee substitutes to board bills 275 and 276.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get them properly before us. The chair will entertain a motion that we, why don't we start one at a time? So we'll talk about 275 at this point, and then we'll complete that discussion, and then we'll go to the next one. The chair will entertain a motion that we put before us Board Bill number 275, committee substitute.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderman Kennedy. Aye. Alderwoman Cruzen.
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis.
Aye.
Alderman French.
Aye.
Alderman Coder. Aye. Alderwoman Green.
Present.
Sorry.
Aye. Is that an aye?
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey?
Aye.
8 ayes and 0 noes.
Okay. Now that the 275 committee substitute is appropriately before us, proceed, Alderwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Board Bill 275 committee substitute approves the form of a parcel development agreement for the Healthworks project. No parcel development agreement was attached to the version of Board Bill 275 that was introduced because it was still being negotiated, and we all know that that's why we had some delay, and now I'm back before you. The parcel development agreement provides up to $6,420,000 of TIF assistance for the initial phase for the 3-bedroom hospital facility. Up to the $4,663,000 of the $6,420,000 of the TIF assistance may be payable from area-wide TIF revenues. It should be noted this amount is equal to the cost of a new road to be constructed within the former Pruitt-Igoe site that will serve the Healthworks projects and other future development. The remainder of the TIF assistance for the initial phase will be payable from TIF revenues generated solely from the Healthworks project. Up to $1,580,000 of TIF assistance from the expansion phase, and the initial phase and the expansion phase will collectively include approximately 103,000 square feet of hospital and other medical facilities. All of the TIF assistance for this expansion phase will be payable from TIF revenues generated. Oh, I already said that. I'm sorry. I'm drawing a blank here. Another additional change that was made to this committee substitute was that the developer must provide evidence of financing by December 31st, 2017 for the initial phase and December 31st, 2018 for the expansion phase. And at this time, if you all have any specific questions regarding Board Bill number 275, committee substitute, I'd like to defer to SLDC or the developers to answer those questions.
If we could kind of cut to the chase here for the benefit of the committee, one of the aspects of this, I guess the key aspect for this that made it kind of complex or a little different was the fact that some of the TIF notes are going to be supported by revenue throughout the district as opposed to the specific project. And, if the project proceeds as as is hoped, that they may not need that. But if we could, maybe we can get somebody up here and kind of jump right to the chase and take us through that so that everybody understands that, kind of get that out of the way
It might
first.
be helpful, maybe we get the board so that we
Yeah,
can show that, but as at the previous presentation, the site that we're talking about is generally Pruitt-Igoe, but on this site is a road that would service the site, which speaks to the $4 million area-wide request. And then it also shows the general site that will be developed first on the site. And so that is essentially the basis for the deal. And I guess if there are any specific questions, we can answer those. Let's get the board up, and then we can point to. So essentially, the road that is being constructed is this road. It connects back to Cass Avenue, but this is Jefferson Avenue, and it will come in adjacent to this pink building here is the very first building that will be constructed, followed by the building here. But it sets the stage for the redevelopment of this phase here.
A little glare on it.
Move it to the side for a
That's
moment.
better.
And then, so why don't you, there's a 3-room hospital, is that three-bed hospital, is that correct then? And then,
Yeah, it is a three-bed hospital in the very first, and then there is an expansion phase that follows is an addition other medical facilities that could include, as Dr. Linehan indicated, depending upon the need, different kinds of medical services.
and the challenge before, thing that's driving all this is there's a certificate of need process up at the state, and there's a window that if you don't achieve your construction by a certain point in time, you could leave the certificate of need more kind of on borrowed time anyway, because this was supposed to be somewhere else and it got relocated as a result of the NGA. So that put all that in perspective for people. At our last meeting, I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Linehan a couple months back, and a very impressive person, incredible vision, and it sounds like he's a very accomplished person. He has got I think a real, vision for the future. Whether that is realized or not, of course, that's yet to be seen, but this would be the first step in it. Why don't we
Yes,
go?
to that, Mr. Chairman, is that he has been able to implement his vision both in Harlem and now in Puerto Rico, and so this is,
That's why, I didn't mean to diminish his,
Right,
yeah, he has a pretty impressive track record, so I certainly did not mean to be dismissive in my remarks regarding Dr. Linehan. And part of it involves a large orthopedic group of doctors that would be investing down here as well, that evidently he's got a long-standing relationship with. So with that, why don't, Mr. Clerk, if I could have our cheat sheet there. Yeah, I know this is kind of overwhelming for folks who haven't seen this, but why don't we go through here, listen to me, Dr. Bosley, Alderman Bosley. He's the professor. Professor Bosley.
Got a PhD.
Do you have any questions, Alderman? No. Alderman Kennedy, do you have any questions?
Can I just walk back in?
Sure, we'll circle back around then. Alderwoman Cruzen.
Just a couple, is that entire area, the green area, is that the whole Pruitt-Igoe site?
yes, it is. It's all the way down.
Yeah.
And so the first phase is essentially the western edge of it.
Okay, and which building is the hospital on that? Is that the kind of orange or
This
whatever?
is the three-bed hospital here, the
Okay.
pink,
Okay,
and this is the expansion piece.
okay. And, I've been to that site, and there's actually a little kind of a road type of thing, old abandoned road in there. I've walked around. It's a very overgrown
Yes.
site, and so does this do the clean, what's sort of the first step? We're gonna clean up the.
There's a companion brownfield application that is being considered at the state as we speak that should be approved. We've gone through a number of the conversations with them, so the brownfield application will be approved, and that will help with the cleanup of the environmentally on the site.
Looks like a big job.
It is.
Okay. And when do you think this road will actually get built?
I think this year.
Okay.
I think they'll start it this year.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Moore is not present today. Alderwoman Davis.
No questions.
Alderman French.
No questions at this time.
Alderman Carter. Not present. Alderman Kotar.
No questions.
Alderwoman Green.
No questions.
Circle back. Alderman Kennedy, you have questions?
If I could make so I have clarity, it's a three-bedroom,
It's a three-bed.
three-bed, not yet, three-bed hospital.
Right.
With.
That's the initial one, yes.
Initially, with expansion capabilities.
Correct.
They're looking to expand later, and then there'll be other health services in the building?
Right, and other clinic opportunities, and I think they will learn in that very first phase what some of those other requirements of like dialysis and other things that I think we mentioned the other day that could be opportunity.
Okay. There's no question?
I need to share something with you.
Okay.
May I?
Sure.
Okay. I did share with the doctor that he might want to look at the study that we did.
That's what I was going for.
And I also shared with him that we have been working and looking at other services, most especially dialysis and those kinds of things. And I also put him in touch with Dr. Rainey
Okay. All right.
for some of the things that he was talking about.
Okay. In 2009, I believe it was, our caucus, the African American Automatic Caucus, issued a health disparity study with BJC. That disparity study were for the zip codes in North St. Louis. The results came back basically saying that if you lived in North St. Louis, your ability to access health care was like you lived in a third world country. There was only like one doctor's office in North St. Louis, maybe 2 dentists at the most. So that the ability to access health care was virtually nil. And so this type of thing certainly begins to answer some of the recommendations that were in that study and are more than gravely needed in North St. Louis. So with that, it certainly is something that I believe should have our support.
Alderman Kennedy, you weren't here last time, but I was thinking of you in your absence because sometimes you have kind of a convergence of things from different directions, and it's kind of a coincidence, I guess, or maybe I had met Dr. Linehan initially, I guess, a couple months ago, and as we were going through the presentation, the reason I thought of you was that I know you're an advocate of the equity lens, and you brought that all before us. And as many of us went through the training down here, we were talking about how people have different perspectives, and culturally, you kind of interpret things differently based on that perspective. And one of the things Dr. Linehan brought up was the impact of that cultural, gap in communication that results in medicine, and as a result of that, it can result in major claims and a great deal of expense. And so becoming more culturally aware as you provide medicine is an important, is being recognized as a growing component. And his success in other areas, or some of the success, he sounds like a very accomplished man, is that he has set up some medical training in New York, and also is it Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico. And much of that is kind of geared to cultural awareness.
Right.
And his vision is for this to eventually grow into a medical training area that would include a variety, different levels of education, but it would be kind of, his goal would be for it to be a kind of the mecca of cultural awareness, medicine, medical training for the Midwest. So, it's quite a vision, and this would be the first step in it, but it would be, I think, very, very exciting for St. Louis if that were to be realized. But are there any questions of the sponsor or Alderman from the 21st?
Yeah. Do you mind if my questions mix both bills together?
Sure. I think it's probably appropriate. I'm sure they're related.
It's actually for for Otis. So the big changes between the original versions and the committee substitutes is that the agreements were actually added to them, right?
Correct.
Okay.
You're using that.
First, has there been any big changes to the numbers? I do see some small changes here. So in the difference between the fiscal impact statement on the first one and the second one, there is a few small differences. Under the TIF hotel tax abatement numbers, it went from, well, I don't know which one's the first one. This is the first one. On the first one, it went from 7,871,000 to 8,020,000. And then there was another small change in the permanent loan first mortgage numbers, went from 44,308,000 to 44,159,000. And then there is a little bit of a difference now. The two numbers, the two line items are no longer equal from projected sources of revenue and projected uses. Previously, those were equal. This is how much we expect to come in, this is how much we expect to go out. Now there is a $30,000 difference.
I apologize that John Ferry isn't here today. He had a family issue that, but I think it's a matter of the timing that when he put it together. I think they're very, as you say, they're very close, and I think it was just a matter of some of the minor changes that were made that maybe that didn't get caught up on both sheets at the same time.
Okay. It's a very minor difference, but you might want to make sure that
I think it's a typo.
those two numbers are equal, the number that's coming in and the number that's going out.
We will.
Okay. Otherwise, that's just 30,000 floating around there. Okay. In these agreements here, I mean, there's a, the difference between the first one and the second one is pretty significant, so I haven't had a chance to read all of this. Is there anything in here about minority participation or MBE participation?
Just all of them will have that. In fact, Mark, why don't you come up and maybe you can speak to it. But if it's coming from SLDC, we are because of our focus on inclusion, we make sure in the early on discussions that everybody understands that, but we also make sure that it's in all of our documents. And so part of what we will do is make sure that as you know, we've instituted the new monitoring system and working very closely with Slate and for the workforce. And so all of that will be adhered to. And in fact, the developer was before we developed all these systems, had been proactive in trying to do that, but now he is moving the compliance and monitoring of this construction based on our program, and so it will be effective based on the city's desires.
Okay. So if someone either now or later can point me where that is, but
That's right here.
are we saying that they were is the goal the current executive order, or are there higher goals?
It's the ordinance. If you go on page 2, section 2.
Page 2, section 2. Hold on.
Alderman Kenny, Alderman, it's in the parcel development agreement. The shorter document is the smaller document is the parcel development agreement attached to 275.
275, all right. Got this one?
So the parcel development agreement on page 2 references that this is going to pick up all of the, so not in the ordinance itself, it's in the attachment to the ordinance.
Okay. All right, page 2, section 2. All right.
Section 2C at the tail end of that references the various provisions of the redevelopment agreement that this picks up, and it's the ordinance, the executive order, it's all of the participation requirements. So the developer will be required to pay the slate fees, which on this deal translates to about $112,000 for monitoring purposes. So that's picked up in here as well.
Okay. And when it refers to section 7.22 and section 7.26,
Yeah.
that is of section of what?
Of the redevelopment agreement with the developer, so that we've
Is
got.
that this?
No, it's with the existing redevelopment agreement with Northside.
I got you.
Regeneration. And so it's saying that the sub-developer here, the LLC, this, Northside Urgent Care Center is subject to these prior obligations for participation requirements.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
I've been recently informed that clock is 4 minutes slow.
Oh, no.
So unless there is something that is like life-threatening, I would encourage us to go ahead and kind of do our paperwork here. Alderman, no other questions, would you like to close on Board Bill 275, Committee Substitute?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would just like to ask for your favorable support of Board Bill number 275. There's been a dire need for a community in North St. Louis, and specifically within this neighborhood that has some of the highest demographics in regards to health concerns, and I'd ask for your favorable support.
Okay, do we have a motion for Board Bill number 275, Committee Substitute?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 19th and seconded about three different other people here. So there is a request for a previous role. Hearing no objections, we'll consider Board Bill Number 275 Committee Substitute passed out of committee with a do pass recommendation. Before us is Board Bill Number 276. We need to put the committee substitute properly before us, so if we could have a motion for that.
So moved.
Was that the 18th and seconded by the 7th? There's a request for the previous role. We're starting to rock and roll here now. Okay, no objections. That is properly before us now. Now the chair will entertain a motion for a,
So moved.
okay, Radar, thank you. I think that concludes our business. Meeting adjourned.